everybody, thanks so much for joining us for today's episode of the TypeAlias Show live stream. I wasn't sure if we were going to do it. You know, we had a lot of crazy schedules going on with December and all the holidays and everything, so I wasn't sure if we were going to do it. But we put it out there, and you all sounded pretty enthusiastic about it, so we said, let's go ahead and get one more live stream in before the end of the year. So today we're going to catch up on some of the latest news happening in the Kotlin and Android worlds. We're going to dive into some of the fun new preview features in Kotlin 2.1. And we're going to look at some of your responses to some of my earlier videos and a whole lot more. As always, with me today behind the scenes is my lovely producer, who also happens to be my wife, Elizabeth. Round of applause for the producer. Now, before we get into everything, let's check in with you all in the chat and see how you're doing. Live streams are fun, I think, because they're interactive. So talk to me in the chat. Feel free to ask me questions there. And I might or might not be able to answer them. So if you know the answer to somebody else's question, feel free to reply to them. And in fact, one of my favorite things about these live streams is just seeing your interactions with each other in chat. I think everyone here has been just so friendly and encouraging to each other. So join the chat and make some new friends. So let's see what we've got going on here. Nothing in the chat yet? All right, start talking to me, people. That's fine. I hope everybody's December is off to a good start. I'm wondering particularly about Advent of Code. Advent of Code is still going, and I've had a really busy season here. So I kind of fell off the wagon after the first week or so. But I would love to know how you all are doing, if you're surviving better than I did. So our poll for today is about Advent of Code. So our producer will get that up on chat, and we will check in on that after a little bit of news here. See, we got Francis says he's doing great. First time on live and feeling awesome. That's great. Yeah, thanks so much for being here. We've got a lot of people waving in, saying hello. So yeah, so glad to have everybody here. Thank you so much, guys. It's great to see everybody. All right, well, let's go ahead and dive into some of the news. There is actually a lot going on. So let's get into some of that, and we'll check in on chat here in a little bit. So during Kotlin Conf this past year, the Kotlin team, as you know, released the long-awaited Kotlin 2.0 version. And also during the talks there, they teased some of the upcoming features that would arrive in Kotlin 2.1. And well, they've stayed true to their word. Kotlin 2.1 came out just a few weeks back, and it includes some preview features that they had announced. Things like pattern guards, non-local breaks and continues, multi-dollar string interpolation. Those were kind of the big ones that they had pointed out back during Kotlin Conf. But it also includes something I'm excited about, which is the preview, the very first preview of the direct Swift export. So anybody who's doing multi-platform for mobile, that's kind of a big deal to see that kick off. We've got some stabilization of the new Gradle DSL for multi-platform projects. We've got incremental compilation and better debugging for WebAssembly. So a lot of really cool things in this release, and you can find the link for the page that we're looking at here. You can find that on the description for this live stream. And we're also going to zoom in on a few of these salient features from 2.1 in just a little bit later on in this episode. So I'm not going to take too much more time to talk about things here. And I'll probably eventually get around to demonstrating a lot of the new features just in videos or other things later on. So yeah, so we got Alexander's a little bit disappointing. I don't know if that's if you're saying that jokingly or not. Yeah, maybe you are. Maybe you are actually disappointed in it. I'm pretty happy to see some of the progress just after so long of getting to Kotlin 2.0. I feel like that kind of took a long time to get to 2.0. It makes sense. It was a big project. But even seeing things like what other languages like Java had been doing in the meantime, they've made some pretty good progress as well. So I'm pretty happy with it. But yeah, if there are certain things, Alexander, that you're not that you're kind of wishing were there, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your thoughts there. All right, let's see what else we got here. We've got the Kotlin Multiplatform User Survey. So JetBrains has got an open survey about multi-platform, and as usual, they're offering a chance to win a prize if you provide meaningful answers, of course. And I think Kotlin was kind of originally regarded as sort of this modern alternative to Java. I think a lot of people still see it that way, but over the past 5 years or so, like I said, Java's kind of started to get its game together a little bit better, which is good. I think it's good to see that influence that languages like Kotlin and Scala have had. It's introduced better type inference, string interpolation, sealed types I think they have now. And while I do think that Kotlin still stands out from Java just kind of on its feature set alone, null safety, for example, I do sometimes wonder if Kotlin multi-platform is kind of going to be one of its capabilities is going to be a little bit more of the differentiator from Java and other languages going forward. Like, sure, you can run Java on multiple platforms, but you have to have the JVM running there, and you can't always have a JVM everywhere. Like, for example, on iOS, they don't allow runtimes like JVM. So anyway, I really do love where things are going with Kotlin multi-platform. So I think there's a lot of great potential, and maybe your feedback on this survey might just help shape the direction, shape that potential. All right, this one just came out yesterday, I think. Yeah, yesterday. They just formally announced the Klibs.io, and this is a new website. You might be familiar with the package, what was it called? The package, I don't have it up here. There's a package search that they'd had for both Java and Kotlin multi-platform. Well, it looks like Klibs.io is meant to be sort of the go-to for multi-platform libraries. And so I think we've all, at one time or another, we've probably all found some library that we were just like really excited about, some Kotlin library, and then it turns out that it's JVM only, right? And you can't use it in your multi-platform projects, and so you're kind of bummed out about it. But it looks like with some of the options on this new website, you'll be able to just check mark exactly what it is you're looking for and be able to find Kompati. That's still the funniest name to me. But you'll be able to search for what it is you want and ensure that it's on the proper platforms that you need to support for your project. So give that one a look if you are working in multi-platform. All right, let's see. You got a sneak peek when I was clicking around here a minute ago. We got the Arrow 2.0 release. This is, most of you probably know, Arrow's been primarily known as the go-to functional programming library for Kotlin for a long time. It actually was originally, functional and category, I think, were the names of the two libraries that were functional programming libraries for Kotlin. They merged them into Arrow. And these days, it's presented more as sort of this collection of companion libraries that gives you functionality for common tasks. So probably like taking you a step or two beyond what the standard library would provide you. And their website still says that it's inspired by functional, data-oriented, and concurrent programming. The cool thing with Arrow 2.0 is it's built with Kotlin 2.0, and it's available for all target platforms. And so that's pretty cool, including now WebAssembly. So they're planning, as you can see here, they're planning to provide artifacts for every platform that's supported by Kotlin. Very cool. I think a lot of Kotlin libraries, that's going to start being just what we're counting on, right? I think we're all going to start saying if it's a Kotlin library, we're going to expect it to be on multiple platforms. Now, I've personally got only a little bit of experience with Arrow, but if you guys are interested, if this is, if the library is of interest to you, maybe we can get somebody from the Arrow team on as a guest at some point. That would be kind of fun to do. So we will consider that here in a little bit. Okay, now before we wrap up the news segment, I do have a little bit of news of my own. So many of you have asked about the print edition of Kotlin and Illustrated Guide, and we're aiming to finally have that available for purchase probably in February. I think we're looking about 6 to 8 weeks out, which is pretty exciting. I get a little nervous about giving you estimates on things like that, right? Developers in our estimates were notoriously bad, I guess. But we've got some decisions at this point to make about how we do the printing, things like whether we're going to do a print on demand situation or if we can print a big batch of them up front. So it's going to be helpful for me to know how many of you are interested in buying the print edition? And if that's you, you can go to print.typealias.com and fill out the form there. And just to be clear, if you change your mind later on this, that's totally fine. If you decide not to buy it, that's not a problem. That's totally cool. But we're just trying to get kind of a rough idea of how many people are interested so that we know how many to print. We just don't want to be way off on our estimates on either side. So thanks for doing that. And finally, if you don't want the print copy, but you're interested in getting the PDF, you can take a look at shop.typealias.com. We've got a few things here from like digital products also to physical products. So if you want Mr. Grumpy Recalcitrant Man to keep you company on your desk, you can get him on a mug or a notebook. We got a few other fun things there too. Speaking of Mr. Grumpy, we haven't seen him in a while. I think it's about time for Mr. Grumpy to make an appearance in a video. So we'll have to see if we can get him on in the new year, huh? So if you do stop by the shop.typealias.com, just make sure you use the promo code winter20 and you can get 20% off through the end of the year. We got that at the top there, so you don't forget about that one. All right, let's see what we've got here. Hey, Franklin. Franklin's waving in. Always good to see you, Franklin. That's great. All right. And Alexander's clarifying a little bit here. What about the contract API? It's still experimental, as I understand. Yeah, that is true. Yeah, I can understand some of that. Like there are a lot of libraries and a lot of features that have kind of been hanging out in that experimental state, and I think a lot of that has been just waiting on getting that Kotlin 2.0 done. And now that it's done, I can understand kind of feeling like some of those things probably ought to get wrapped up as well. So, yeah. So I can see where you're coming from. All right. Well, let's check in on the poll results and see how we're doing with those. So, Advent of Code this year, half of you not even trying it. I can understand that because it can get to be quite a bit of work. 23% of you guys are still going strong. Nice. Way to go, guys. Yeah, okay. Yeah, 19% for the first week, so I don't feel like I'm, I feel like I'm in good company. I'll say that. And for 2 weeks, so about 25% for the first 2 weeks there, 23%, I guess. 23% still going strong. So yeah, that's great, man. I'm like, I got to say, I really admire you all who are still going strong with Advent of Code, because sometimes around this time especially, yeah, about halfway through, and later, it just feels like sometimes I've spent just hours trying to solve those problems. The other thing I haven't figured out is how some people seem to use Advent of Code as a way to explore new technologies or new languages. And I think that's great. But for me, like I feel like even with things that I understand well, that I'm spending so much time trying to solve the puzzles with just what I like already know well, that if I were trying to solve it with tooling that I don't know as well, I would be lost for sure. But you guys are pretty smart folks, so that is great. All right, Franklin says that he likes the kinds of classes cheat sheet. Yeah, thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. That's one that just kind of wraps up all of the 8 different kinds of classes, from just your normal classes to your data classes and annotations and all that kind of thing. So I appreciate you saying that, Franklin. That's great. All right. Well, I think we're probably about ready to get into some code. So let me pull up a few things here, and we're going to start with the guards. And I know that some of you have probably already looked into guards on your own, but I kind of felt like it'd be fun to zoom into them, partly because they definitely solve a problem that I've personally run into in the past, and partly because there are a lot of strong opinions about it, and I thought it'd be fun to like toss it out there and kind of see what everybody thinks. So before we get going too far in this, I did want to mention that we do have the source code available. Some of you guys have asked for us to make the source code available from these live streams and other videos, and that's a great idea. So yes, we created a GitHub organization for TypeAlias Studios, which is the company that we're running. And going forward, you'll be able to find the source code on that organization. And you can see at the bottom of the screen there, we've got the URL for the source code for today. If you're interested in following along, or if afterward you just want to kind of pull it back up and take a look, that's what that's there for. All right, so let's take a look at what we've got for, actually before we get into too much of the actual source code, let's talk a little bit broadly about guards, because I think notoriously in the world of software development, we often have a term that means something generally, and then like in a particular language, it has a very specific meaning. And so for example, when we talk about like an interface, we might just mean the public functions and properties of an object, right? Every object has an interface and that's how the code around it interacts with it. But then when you get to a specific language like Java, C# or Kotlin, then an interface is actually like it's an actual code element. Like you actually literally type interface to create a new type. And so if I'm talking about interfaces, I might be talking about the general concept. I might be talking about the specific concept, and you kind of either have to figure out what I mean from the context, or I have to clarify what I mean. And so I bring that up because guards are kind of similar in that way. So generally speaking, a guard is just code that checks some kind of a precondition. And if that precondition isn't satisfied, then it short circuits out of the code where that guard is. So with that, let's pull up the source code here, and you can see a little bit of what I mean. So here I've got a function that is making sure that we only ever show order details to the customer who placed the order. So you can see that check is right here, and it's basically this if is wrapping the entire function. So rather than a conditional that is wrapping around the entire function, we could change this to a guard by just inverting the Boolean logic here, and then changing this to, instead of being the branch, we just return directly. And now you can see that gives us the ability to shift over the indentation. We don't have that crazy indentation. It's still doing the same check. But this is kind of just generally speaking what a guard is it's a check for something, and if that condition's not satisfied, it's just going to return out of that location where it is. In this case, we're talking about the function. So this, like I said, has the benefit of also avoiding that extra indentation. This is an example of a guard, and you can use other features in Kotlin to help you with guards like this. For example, instead of returning, if you wanted to throw an exception, you could do require here. And that will throw an illegal argument exception if these two order and the customer don't line up like they should. So this is also a guard because if the condition's not satisfied, you're still ejecting out of this spot in the code. You're still leaving this function. You're just using an exception to do it instead of a return. And of course, as you know, with require, if you're actually checking state of the object, if we're checking the state of order service instead, we might use check here, and that would give us an illegal state exception rather than an illegal argument exception. So that's the general high-level concept of guards. And when you get into specific languages, they might have their own dedicated mechanisms for guards. So for example, let me pull up some Swift here. Swift, you can see, has an actual guard keyword. And it has a condition that goes here, and then it has an else, and you've got to supply the else. And what happens is inside this else, because this is a guard rather than a condition, you have to do something that ejects you from where you are. So in this case, I'm doing a return, but you could also throw an exception. And I think in Swift, if you're inside of a loop, I think you can do like a break or continue inside there as well. So I mentioned all of that to give you a little bit of background as to what a guard is and how it can have some first-class support in languages. So the question is, what do guards look like in Kotlin 2.1? So let's pull up what we've got for Kotlin 2.1. This source code here is actually, I kind of borrowed it from the sealed classes chapter of the illustrated guide. So if it looks familiar, that's where it's coming from. But the kind of guards that we're getting to start with in Kotlin are typically referred to as pattern guards because they're going to be inside a pattern matching structure. So here we've got three kinds of requests. We've got either orders, refunds, and support requests, and they come in through the front desk. And then the front desk is just going to, based on the type that it's getting, determine where it's going to go, if it's going to go to the warehouse or to the help desk. And since this is a sealed class, since request is sealed, as you know, when we use a when, we don't have to put an else branch in here because Kotlin understands that it's sealed. It understands what all of the options are for that sealed class, and so it knows that we've been exhaustive. Now, let's say that one day we realize that forwarding refunds to the warehouse is expensive to do. And so if the refund amount is for less than $10, it would be just more cost effective for us to not forward it to the warehouse and just automatically refund it. So we could try to update our conditional with something like this. We could say if it's a refund request and the request amount is less than $10, then we just print line and say it's automatically refunded. And you'll see we get this this error here, and that's because we're trying to use the Boolean operator here on something that's not a Boolean expression on the left. So if we wanted to do this prior to Kotlin 2.1, we would have to pull the request out of the subject. So we'd have to pull it down here, and we can just do this. And now that works. Now, we've got some repetition here, right? And it's not terrible, but it would be worse if we had this as a when expression instead of a when statement. So remember, you can do a when either as an expression or a statement. If we assign this to a variable, for example, then you can see we get this exception on this condition, and we're going to have to provide an else condition here. And this is kind of, it's kind of unfortunate to have to do this because there should be no case where you end up here, right? So this would be just an illegal state exception maybe. And now everything compiles and we're good to go. So instead, let's solve this with guards in Kotlin 2.1. And to get started with that, we just need to enable the language feature. And we can do that there's a couple different ways we can do that now in our build.gradle.kts file. Here I'm using the language settings with this enable language feature, and they've got an enum of language features that we can enable. So that's how we're doing that there. And now with the guards feature enabled, we can put this back up into the subject. So let's take these out and put them up here like that. And then the only thing left that we've got to do is replace the ampersand with the if keyword, which is now going to be used to tell Kotlin that that's going to be a guard. And you can see the interesting thing is that when we do this, now Kotlin's telling us that this this else is redundant. So it knows that we have satisfied all of the different conditions, so we can pull that back out. And this is even with this as a when expression instead of a statement. So again, this kind of guard is typically found in a branch of in Kotlin, it's in a branch of a when body that has a subject. And since it's using pattern matching, I think I mentioned before, this is sometimes referred to as a pattern guard. And we saw earlier with the functions, we saw that the guards were checking preconditions at the top of a function, and if that precondition wasn't satisfied, then it abandoned that function. Well, with a pattern guard, it's kind of the same idea, but the precondition is going to be checked for the branch, and if the branch, if that condition is not satisfied, then that branch is abandoned. And so Kotlin will just continue looking down the list from top to bottom, the different branches top to bottom as it normally would do. Now, like a lot of developers, I think my hot take on the guards at first was like, why not use ampersands instead of the if keyword? That would kind of feel natural, even though I know the things to the left are not technically a Boolean expression. I guess taken in combination with the subject, it would be considered that. So it sure would seem natural to use ampersands there. Well, Alejandro from JetBrains did address this recently in a live stream that he was on, and he said that, well, the reasons were kind of technical, but he did mention things like Boolean operator priority was something that came into play, and just generally requiring to change the way that the Kotlin parser works. And I took a look around in a few other languages just to kind of see what they're doing, and I saw with Java and C#, they're both using when as the guard keyword, and obviously that wouldn't make sense in Kotlin because when is the entire construct there. Swift uses the keyword where, and Scala uses if, and so I kind of think that if is a fine choice for Kotlin here. So I honestly wasn't convinced at first that we needed this, but I think after seeing how it has it's already existed in a few other languages, and I think once I kind of realized how it's affecting the exhaustiveness of the match in the when, I'm kind of warming up to the idea. So I think I'm feeling a little better about it, but I would love to see if you guys have any thoughts about pattern guards, and like, is this something that you feel is going to be a good benefit to the to the language, or do you feel like it's going to be something that is extra stuff that doesn't need to be done, in increasing feature set without actually adding value or anything like that? So yeah, let me know what you guys think about that. Yeah, still not convinced with the feature set SID. I'm more, like I said, I'm warming up to the idea. I think it's something that, you can kind of work around, but having compiler support for the exhaustive checks is kind of nice. So yeah, so we'll see. All right. Well, I think we are doing pretty good on there. Anybody else got any other comments? I think that is all we've got there for now. Okay. So another feature that I have been pretty excited about is the Swift export. So we're going to take a quick look at the very, very early release for direct Swift export, which is now public in Kotlin 2.1. Now, with all of the excitement around Compose multiplatform, it's easy to kind of forget that Kotlin multiplatform's roots are actually found in shared logic, not shared UI. And in fact, there was a time when it was assumed in Kotlin that we would not have any kind of shared UI tooling. So I thought it'd be fun to recap the options that we have when adopting Kotlin multiplatform, especially in the context of Android and iOS development. So I'm going to share a screen here from my Mac, and I've got 4 screens going on today, guys. So I have a lot that I'm trying to juggle here, but I'm hoping this will everything will work properly. Okay, so a lot of the cross-platform options out there will start with the UI, and if you're going to use their cross-platform tooling, you start with using their tooling for the user interface, and then if at some point you need to kind of get an escape hatch out of the cross-platform tooling and into the native world, then you can kind of do that. They kind of give you some little way that you can escape from the shared code into the native code. And this certainly results in the most shared code, but one of the problems that you'll hear about shared UI is that the app doesn't always feel natural. So for example, we'll take a very simple example. A button in Android app typically has a background to it based on material design. But in iOS, a lot of times your buttons are just often text. And a button, like I said, is a simple example, and some cross-platform tools even kind of work around that to get the more natural feel for it. But if you're trying to follow the design guidelines for each platform and get that truly native feel, a lot of times these cross-platform UI tools won't always cut it. So instead of requiring you to use its own tools, Kotlin multiplatform allows you to really share as much or as little of the code as you want. So you could choose to share the whole UI with Compose multiplatform like we're doing here. Or you could share all of the code except for the UI. So maybe you have like a view model layer and everything behind it could be shared. Or you could do those native and just share the business logic layer, or just the networking layer, or just the models, and you get the idea. So this gives you a lot of flexibility in adopting really as much or as little Kotlin on iOS as you want. So if you've got an iOS team that is fluent in Swift UI, for example, it might make sense to share only the business logic and keep that UI layer completely native so that they can kind of work with the tooling that they're most familiar with. Well, if you're going to use a native iOS user interface with Kotlin behind it, you're going to need some way for Swift and Kotlin to interoperate. And so far, this has been accomplished through Objective-C, which is the language that was used on iOS prior to Swift. You still got some people who swear by Objective-C and just love it, but I think most iOS developers at this point have made the transition to Swift. So the way that it was working previously is that Kotlin, or I guess it's still working today actually, but Kotlin would generate the Objective-C headers. And since Swift can interop with Objective-C, then the Kotlin code would just kind of work with either Objective-C or Swift. Now, a lot of Swift developers don't really want to have to include Objective-C in their projects at all if they can help it. And reasons for this are like increased binary size, some slight runtime performance differences, and just general cruft that the developers don't want to have to deal with. So finally now in Kotlin 2.1, we're getting our first glimpse at a direct Swift export, one that does not require Objective-C. So let's take a look at a project I've got here. Let me get this signed up here. And we'll zoom in a little bit here too. How about that? Get this a little bit bigger. There we go. All right. So here I've got a project, and we have a couple of different modules in this project. This is a Kotlin multi-platform project for mobile. So we've got the Compose app, and in this project, all we've got here is the Android. So we're going to do a separate iOS, native iOS UI. So Compose is going to be used for Android, and Swift UI is going to be used for iOS. Speaking of iOS, this iOS app folder is the one that has the iOS code in it. So we're going to open that up in Xcode here in a minute. And then we've got shared, and we've got we've just got two files here in the shared. One of them is a simple model called a nickname that has an adjective and a noun. And then the nickname service is what we're using to generate a random nickname from an adjective and a noun. So I'm going to go ahead and see if we can get this fired up. And we might already have that up somewhere. And then let's take a look at Swift side as well. Actually, let's jump to the Compose code before we do that so you can see, because I think a lot of you are probably pretty familiar with Compose code at this point. Okay. So here you can see what the app is going to look like. We've just got a nickname that we're remembering. So that's our state. We've got a service. I'm just tying this code directly to the service. You wouldn't really do that normally, but for demo purposes, I think that'll be fine. And then we got a button where we can generate the username, and we'll show that down here inside this box. And when we look at the code in on the Swift side, you're going to see this is actually pretty similar. Like, this is using Swift UI, but you got the same concepts here. You've got the state for the nickname. You've got the service that we're tying into directly. We've got a button, and we've got the just a VStack, which is just going to kind of center this the text for us. So I'm going to go ahead and run this guy here, and we will get to see this working with direct Swift export. And you can see some of this here with the whole package names here. We're going to take a little bit more of a look at that in a minute and see how we can get rid of some of those things as well. So here you can see we've got the generate username, and it's a button. And the reason this is cool is that this is a native Swift UI. This is a native Swift UI. And so there's no multi-platform aspects of this right here. The only things that are going to be shared are behind the UI. And we can generate the username by clicking on this multiple times. Parsimonious puffin. Man, puffins, I'm sorry guys, but puffins are cute. Puffins are adorable. Like, I don't think I'd ever want a pet bird, but if I did, it would be a puffin. I'm just going to put that out there. All right, so that's the idea there. Let's take a look at what code is behind this here. And we will see, let's jump into nickname service here. And from here we can see we've got actual generated Swift code. So we're not looking at Objective-C headers. We're looking at basically Swift directly here, which is pretty good. Now, there are some things that are not yet available, a lot of things actually. And so you can see, for example, here I've got the, let's go back to our nickname service. Here I've got these properties for just getting, you could get these publicly, the adjectives and nouns. But if you look here, you're going to see we've got for adjectives and nouns, we got this Swift.never, which is kind of like the Kotlin.nothing type, because it's going to throw this exception. So the things that are not supported are just very much not supported. Now, things are moving pretty fast on the Swift export. And in fact, if you look at the beta, like I've run this both with just Kotlin 2.1 that's currently released and the beta for 2.1.20, I think. And you can already see like the collection types are working. And so it replaces the, like you no longer get that, that error there. In fact, we might even have that open. Let's see if we can do that real quick here. It's going to be in the libs version toml. Let's try that. We'll rerun this and just see if it pops in with the new implementation for that. So they're actively working on this. It's still very early. You're going to get lots. Yeah, there you go. Okay, we got the, you can see with the beta for 2.1.20, we get implementations for those. So certain parts that are not implemented are just going to be that way, where you're just not going to be able to do anything with it. But you can see they're actively working on this stuff. And when you get in, you'll, when you update to the beta, you'll get even more stuff there. So they're very busy working on this. I think Sergey at JetBrains is posting about this in the Slack channel called Swift Export. I don't think there's any other like official spots where they're like, what I would love to see is some kind of like a checklist of just, here are all the language features in Kotlin. Here's the ones that are supported with direct Swift export. Here are the ones that we're still working on, just to kind of like be able to look at it and see like where things are immediately. But if this is something that you work with, if you're interested in Swift export, it seems to me that the Swift export channel in Slack is really where we get the most updates from JetBrains as to exactly what's supported and what's not. Let's also, before we move on, I did mention how we can get rid of some of these package names. So we're going to come back to our project here. This is inside the shared, and this is the new stuff right here, the Swift export. That's the new stuff. So we can do a flatten packages, flatten package, and Swift export, I think I called it. We'll do that. And when we do that, we will rerun this, and then we'll be able to take these out so that we don't have to fully qualify those names, that's nice. And that's in the current version with Objective-C as well. You can do that, but just so you guys know, you don't have to do it that way. And that should do the trick there. You can also customize the name. We've got shared here, which is just used because that's the name of the module in the Kotlin project, but you can customize the name as well with module name. So that is a quick peek at the very early access. Again, this is not something to use in your production code. They're definitely putting all sorts of warnings and flags everywhere, making sure that you know that this is not ready for production. So it's just for experimentation. But I am really excited about this. And I think for the teams that are doing multi-platform, this is going to be a pretty good benefit on mobile in particular. So, all right, looks like we've got a few comments to get to. So let me see here. We've got Alex AI says, I may have missed it. Does a smartcast take place in the guard condition? It does. Let me pull up that code again here. So we do have the, like, this is the guard condition here, and you can see we've got that kind of light green there telling us it's a smartcast. So because we've already done the is refund request check there, it knows that this is a refund request type here, and so that's why the amount works. Not every request has that on there. Cool. All right, let's see. Do you think that programming languages, not just Kotlin, seem to be updating their feature set too frequently? Seems like a race for who can add more of their languages the fastest. I think there's always a risk of that. I think you've got a few risks. One is that you could end up including too many things or things that are not actually needed or warranted. I do think that's a problem. I've seen languages like, I kind of feel like that happened with Groovy, where it could be like anything to anybody. You could do anything with it, and it was impressive. And I talk about it as if it were in the past. It still exists, but I've stopped using it a while ago. But I kind of felt like with as many features as they gave it, it was almost so versatile that it kind of didn't have much opinion about how you used it. And so I kind of felt like it didn't give me enough direction. Like it didn't give me enough opinion about how we ought to do things. And I think you can end up with that with too many features. Some of that is just kind of hard to do when you've got languages that have been around for a long time. So C# is another example of a lot of change. Like if you look at the earlier versions of C# and where it is today, a lot of changes have happened over time, and you can do a lot more of it now than you could before. And I think there's kind of like at some point you feel like, well, maybe we should have just done it, differently to begin with. And I think that's kind of where the value of kind of new languages coming out can be. I think sometimes the way that we were doing things 20 years ago and the way that we're doing things now might be fundamentally different enough, or maybe not fundamentally, but it's deep enough that it might make sense to start with fresh languages. So I don't know. I kind of feel like if you don't adapt the language, then you're kind of going to end up in a spot where you're not really, that language is not desirable anymore. And I think Java was there for a while for me. Like they did, the Java 6 and 7 age was pretty, I don't know, it felt pretty stagnant. And while it was solid and you could use it, there were just so many other languages and other paradigms, and things change around the languages as well, right? The context around these languages changes. So things like parallel processing, you weren't going to do that much back in the 90s, but now that the processors, are scaling more by having more cores and that kind of thing, it's like now this is kind of the way we're doing stuff. So I think there's a lot of that you do have to keep up, right? You do have to keep up the language, or you have to start a new one, I guess. But I don't know, like you do kind of worry about like features just kind of being the selling point. I think if you just try to stuff a language full of features and you try to do it, especially if you're trying to do it too quickly and you don't really gather all the feedback from the users who are already out there, I think it can be a bad thing. So yeah, I think I can see what you're saying, that it does kind of seem like a race for who can add the most features. And you can do things well. It's just kind of a question of, or you can do anything in like a lot of these languages, right? Just about anything you want to do, you can make it happen, but it's a question of how elegantly can you do it, and all that kind of thing. So anyway, yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for that. All right, we've got from Steven. What do you make of Kotlin multi-platform dependency injection frameworks? I think the only multi-platform dependency injection framework I've used is Coin. So I'm gonna have to take a look at Kotlin Inject, and maybe we can do that as another segment on a future episode. I'd be interested to kind of see, because I haven't really compared a lot of them lately. Coin I've been pretty happy with. You get some people arguing, of course, dependency injection versus service locator and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, Coin's been pretty solid for a while. And Kotlin Inject I'll have to take a look at. And I don't even know, like, are they updating any of the others for multi-platform or not? I kind of assume that Dagger's sticking around primarily as an Android thing, for example. But I'll take a look at Kotlin Inject. I'd love to take a closer look at that one. Thanks for letting me know. Mind sharing why you're using IntelliJ instead of Android Studio? I think that's just kind of where I had started this project. That's a good thing that you noticed there. Yeah, I think that's just where I had set this up when I first started using it. Sometimes because I'm frequently with my multi-platform projects, I'm targeting more than Android. A lot of times I'm targeting desktop as well. So I think I've just kind of gotten used to using IntelliJ there. But yeah, as far as I know, you should be able to just load this whole thing up in Android Studio as well. You do get, like, with IntelliJ, like Android Studio always lags behind IntelliJ just a little bit, right? Because they have to kind of keep up with it to merge in all the latest updates. But yeah, no reason in particular there, Francis. This is just kind of what I started with. All right. Where can I find DSA course? I don't know what DSA means in this context. So Ardosh, maybe you can write back and let me know what you mean there. All right, and yeah, do you think native Android developers are still needed on the job market? I mean, off the cuff, it's like, I think yes. I do think that there are quite a few people looking for native Android developers, and but I think that's probably going to be answered best by, you know, actual empirical data we can get, or at least surveys or whatever that we can point to say how popular are these cross-platform tools. I know things like React Native is very popular. Makes sense, right? Because a lot of people have been JavaScript developers, so it's easy to kind of bring them over to that world that way. But I think so, but I do understand what you mean that, yeah, you just kind of like, when you're the one looking for a job and you can't find it, it feels like there's just nothing there. And so I hope you're not in a role where you're stuck and you're not able to find a job. But I do think Android developers are still needed on the job market. Just kind of is my general sense. I've like talked to people who had been looking for Android developers. So yeah, I don't know. We've got Steven saying that he does get approached with job offers every week. So yeah, I think it tends to be a little bit more just that you know, when you're in that position and you feel like you can't quite find something, it feels like there's nothing there. So I do hope though that if you're looking for a job, I hope that you can find one. And we're certainly rooting for you, and anybody in chat who, you might be able to connect with, certainly feel free to reach out there. Okay, yeah, thanks, guys. DSA, obviously, yeah, of course, data structures and algorithms. I don't know of any DSA courses for Kotlin, so if anybody in chat does know of some DSA that would be a good option for that. Otherwise, I don't know. Maybe I'll have to make that. We'll see. I've got so many things that I'm working on right now, though, so we'll take one thing at a time. All right, anything else here? I think that's everybody. Oh, Paul. Yep, we got from Paul here asking if I've tried Fleet yet. Yes, I have tried Fleet, and I do kind of like where it's going. I think the biggest reason I haven't made the switch, I think, is because I haven't found an easy way to port all of my ridiculous keyboard shortcuts over to Fleet. There might be an easy way to do that now, but last time I looked, it was going to kind of take me a little bit of time. Fleet's pretty good. I'm particularly interested in what they're going to do for the multi-platform tooling. They recently announced that they were going to build an IDE that was kind of made for Kotlin multi-platform development. In particular, it was going to be based on Fleet. So I'm interested to kind of see where that goes. But I do like Fleet. I think the idea is pretty cool. I like the kind of lightweight, heavyweight options that you get with it, where you can kind of start off light and add the extra features to it as you go, if you need to do more than that. So yeah, I'm pretty good with Fleet. And I think that's going to be, I think it's going to be a pretty solid, I think it's going to be a solid app going forward, but we'll see. It's been in a preview state for a long time, so we'll see. All right, any other comments about puffins in particular? I would like to know. Just kidding. Rachel likes puffins, just heard from the producer, so I'm glad. All right, well, I think that we can move on. So before we wrap up this episode, I wanted to take a look at some community comments. Now, community comments is sort of a new segment for the show, and we're going to feature extraordinary, insightful, and helpful comments that you all made that came from you in response to either questions I've asked or videos that I've put out. So the comment that I liked a lot recently was in response to a live stream that we did not too long ago, and then I also made a clip when we were talking about creating a slot API for composables. So you might remember the idea that we had about that I had. I'll fess up to it, about trying to create a subtype of a composable And it looks something like you see here at the bottom left. And you might remember when I was doing this, I ended up with some exceptions at runtime when I was trying to do this on an abstract type. So it worked when I used an open class, but if I used an abstract class or an interface, I would get that runtime exception that you kind of see in the red there at the bottom right. Well, a few of you commented about how we can avoid that runtime exception, but I think Nathan Schertz was the first to point this out, so I'm going to go with his comment today. He mentioned that we just need to add the @composable annotation to the invoke function on the abstract class or interface, and then we don't have to use open classes as I had done. He said, I don't think that needs to be concrete. You just need a way of marking it as composable every step along the way. And that's absolutely right. So I think most of us agreed that it's probably best not to limit your composable types, but if that's something that you end up doing, if you decide that you do want some kind of a slot API, marking the abstract function as composable will help you avoid the exception that I got there. And then the second community comment for today is for the anonymous functions. I like this one. You might remember I did a video about anonymous functions not too long ago showing how they're distinct from lambdas. So I'm not talking about lambdas, I'm talking about anonymous functions that have their own syntax and rules for how they return from the function. And I asked if anybody had any ideas about things that we could do only with anonymous functions that we could not do with lambdas. Well, Marco demonstrated that when you're currying functions, it's a lot easier to read with anonymous functions. So he gave some examples here, and I kind of reprinted them with a little longer example at the bottom, but you can kind of see with the anonymous functions that we've got at the top here, we just kind of join those equal signs, join those functions with equal signs. And it's still possible to do that with the lambdas, but it ends up making it a little bit more difficult to read because you kind of have that nesting of those curly braces. So I don't know if currying is something that you do. Maybe anonymous functions are a good option for you. And I still haven't seen anything that we just simply can't do with anonymous functions, or that we can do with anonymous functions that are not possible to do with lambdas. But I do love that. Marco pointed this out. So thanks for doing that, Marco. All right, we'll do one last check-in here before we wrap up. What are the best ways to learn compose? Any thoughts you can share? Yeah, I think, yep, we do have best resource out there, official docs, Code Labs. Yeah, Francis, I think I'd kind of agree with what Francis said there. That's kind of the go-to source for it. Yeah, and I think a big part of it is just even understanding what's behind compose and kind of like the mental model behind it. There's a lot of question of like, how is this going to affect something if I add this line here and assign it this way? Is it going to, is every recomposition going to cause a slowdown because of the way I'm doing that? So yeah, start off with the official docs and the Code Labs and see how far you can get with that. If anybody's got some good resources on that as well, I'd love to hear, but that's my take as well. And from Mohammed, we got, are you continuing the rest of design patterns? Yes, I am going to continue design pattern series in the new year. Thank you for asking that. Yeah, I kind of took a little bit of an interruption there, but with some of the other lambdas and anonymous functions and stuff. But yeah, we'll get back to it's not going to be the next video. We got the next one kind of queued up already. But the one after that, I think we'll probably start getting back to the patterns. The reason I ended up getting off track on that was I started going down the builder, which we kind of talked a little bit about in one of the videos, and I wanted to do a video just on builder DSLs. But then I kind of got down this whole rabbit hole of all the different types of functions you can use in it, and kind of weaving things in and out. So that kind of took me down a rabbit trail. So we will continue that soon. And let's see here. Can we create abstraction class and in that classes define composables? Yes. Yeah. If you want to see more about what I was doing with that, we were doing in activity fragment approach. You can put composables inside, like you can have objects that are composables and you can have functions in objects that are composables. So when you're saying kind of like similar to the activity fragment approach, I'm not sure quite what you're getting out there or like what characteristics you're thinking of. But yeah, you can take objects and use them as composables. So either the objects themselves, or you can just have an object that has multiple functions that are composable. You can do it that way as well. Cool. All right. Well, that's all I've got for today. Thanks so much for being here. I hope you can take some time off this Christmas. I think we've all been working really hard this year, so I hope you get a chance to disconnect and maybe unplug some of those devices and get some good quality time with your family and your friends. And then we'll come back for the new year, and we'll be ready to rock and roll as the new year starts off. So I hope you have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, and I will see you next time.